Wow, my mic wasn't even on and it was making a lot of noise. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this link and give it to my friend so he can watch. Wait, that's the wrong link. It's a click, what the heck? What's the union? You do realize, mate, you do realize I was kidding you the whole dang time. This is my Polish friend Anzi, and he's quite the character, as you can tell. Okay, so I'm working on a Unity terrain engine. I'm gonna go ahead and show you what it's gonna look like when it's done. I already made it once, but it's kind of, I don't know what to say. It's not very well designed, but I'll show you once so you can see how it looks. It's not very well optimized, I guess is what I need to say. Yeah, so this is the first version of it. Wait, okay, here we go. So now it's loaded the scene. See, there was nothing in the scene, and there's nothing in the scene, but when I start the game, it actually builds the entire terrain. So it builds it procedurally using a height map image and a color map image, as you can see. Yeah, I don't know what he's saying, but as you can see, there's constant visual bugs. I don't know what those visual bugs are from on the mountains, but yeah, this terrain is rendering perfectly. Otherwise, looks pretty nice. Texture is pretty. Yeah, so it can be used for like a CK2 map. This map is actually perfectly capable. These images are actually originally designed for CK2, but I might actually make my own thing with them. I don't know. Let's see what I can do. These mountains are very pretty. I hand drew them. That's why they kind of sneak out in like a pattern, like normal mountains do. Yeah, it looks very realistic and pretty. So yeah, it's all done with just this height map and this color map. And what it does is it passes in the height map and it uses that to build a mesh, a 3D model of the terrain, where one vertex in the model is a single pixel, and basically the darker the color of the pixel, the lower the elevation of that vertex. So it does this for every single vertex. Every single pixel, it makes a vertex, and that's how it builds the mesh. Of course, it skips some. It doesn't do it for every single pixel because that would be kind of silly having millions and millions of vertices. But it skips about. Let's see how many it skips. If I look at my terrain, my current I can't even see it. I don't know. I think it's skipping 4 right now. So every 4 pixels, it has no, resolution factor is 8. So basically, it's skipping 8 pixels in this image, and every 8 pixels, it draws a vertex at that height, and that's how it looks like that. And actually, it's not one giant mesh because if I had one giant mesh for this, there would be a severe size limitation because you can only have meshes that are like 65,000 vertices, and this is way larger than 65,000 vertices. So what I did was I built it in chunks. So actually, this whole terrain is actually a bunch of meshes. You see, see all the squares? These are all individual chunks. It's all like Minecraft and how it's built with chunks. It's the same mindset. So it builds it chunk by chunk. Each chunk is 128 by 128 vertices. I can look at the mesh and you can see that's how many vertices it has. It's actually quite a highly detailed mesh, which is pretty interesting. Yeah, that's that for the terrain generation. So now, Anzi, if you're watching, yeah, you're watching. Okay, so Anzi, I'm going to show you how to code this. Are you ready? Tell me if you're ready or not. So the first thing you do in Unity is you create your structure. You create your folder structure. So I always have a resources folder, and in the resources folder I put all the images. And I just put a separate folder for maps, and this is where all the maps I'm going to use to draw the image. I have a normal map, I have a height map, and I have a color map. So I also have a normal map this time. So I can actually make the normals have the light shine differently off of different parts of the surface depending on the angle, so it looks more bumpy. And of course the scripts would actually be in the main assets folder. It's not a resource. The reason I have a folder called resources is because there's a special tool in Unity called resources load, where you can just grab resources from within the resources folder. So you create it. It's actually used for most games, a folder called resources, and I just say grab all images, for instance, and it'll grab all the images and it'll make it nice and orderly for me so I can just use them in the game. Stuff like that. So scripts, and I have this map folder in the scripts. These are all the scripts for the map, which are the scripts I'm going to be messing around with. So there's a bunch of scripts here. I'll explain them one by one. The first and most important script is map. And the map is basically everything. Everything is handled by the map. The map is a singleton, if you could say. It's a class that, but it's not really a singleton because it has model behavior. It's kind of a Unity thing. You can't really make singletons, but the way it works is you place this map on an object, you place the object in the room, and then it uses the map. It uses the map to build 3D mesh. It looks at the image and then it builds the 3D mesh based on the image. It's actually very simple to do that. Now I'll show you. But oh yeah, and Anzi, my friend here, is saying he wants to change the engine to Unreal. Now Unreal Engine is very powerful, and it also has a better license than Unity because you can make games and you don't have to pay as much royalty on it. But the problem with Unreal Engine, I think, is it uses C++, and C++ is a lot harder to get into. Now, I can do C++ because I'm experienced with it. I've actually taken a class in it right now, so I know C++ really well. But for someone like you, Anzi, you're kind of new to this. I recommend you stay with Unity for now, at least for now, so you can learn how to do things, because C# is a lot easier to understand. I mean, when you start getting the C++, you have things like pointers and scope resolution operator and arrow operator, and you get all these crazy things, lambdas. You can do lambdas in C# too, but you don't have to. Yeah, but when you get into C++, things start getting really hectic if you don't know what you're doing. So I recommend you just stick with C# first before you learn the basics. Okay, so I'm going into my map class. As you can see, I use Visual Studio for code editing because this is like the most powerful editor available to Unity. I mean, I can use other ones, but this is like the most powerful one I know about, and it's very useful. It has all the tools I need. It even has debugging tools where I can run the game, and I can have Visual Studio open on the side, and I can see the frame rates and all that in here, and I can see like what processes on the game are making it too slow and all that stuff. So it's very useful to use this one. Okay, so the first thing I do is I'm going to create a game object, create an empty, and I'm going to press F2 on my keyboard so I can rename it, and I'm going to call this map. So this is the map object. This is the main object for this map drawing that is going to handle everything. In programming, when you have one class that does everything, you can kind of call it a singleton, but this is not really a true singleton because it's extending model behavior. Don't worry about that. Just understand it's a single class that handles everything that has to do with the map. Everything is passed into here, and this map builds everything. So I'm going to take the map script and I'm going to drag and drop it onto the map object. So now I can script the map object using the script. And as you can see, I'm going to undo that. You can see there's nothing on this map object right now except for a transform, which all game objects have. But the moment I take the map script and I drag onto the map object, you can see that the mesh render and the mesh filter automatically are added to the object. This is because if you view the script, I have this at the top: require component, mesh filter, mesh renderer. So mesh filters and mesh renderers are the two components needed to build a 3D mesh procedurally, which I'm about to do. And when you have this on your script, require component, and you say a bunch of components, it will automatically add those components to the object when you add the script to the object, which is very useful. And of course, I have a bunch of private variables here. I have private texture G, height map, tree map, river map, color map. These are going to be the various map textures, which I've already showed you. If I go into here, images, maps, these are the textures, and I'm going to store them in the class in those variables. Now I'm going to make a few more variables. I'm going to go private mesh filter MF and private mesh renderer MR. So these are two private variables. I cannot access them from outside of this class. That's what private means. And this one is for storing a mesh filter, and this one is storing a mesh renderer. So now in the awake function, as soon as this object is created, it's going to call this function, and in this function I can just go mf and assign it to get component mesh filter, and mr equals get component mesh renderer. So it's going to grab the mesh render and then grab the mesh filter, and it's going to store them in these variables. So later on, I can just say mr or mf, and it will know I'm talking about the mesh filter or the mesh render of this object. It's very easy. And I'm doing it in the awake function because the awake function is the first function that gets called when an object is built. So it will do this before I do anything else. Alright. So now that I have all this, a good thing you can do in C# is make summary stuff in regions. It really cleans up your code. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to go ahead and make a region. So I'm going to press #, I'm going to go region, and I'm going to call this images, image maps. And then at the end of this, I'm going to make another # say end region. Now the reason I did this is because now I can there's a minus sign right here. I can click this and it will minimize all those textures. So they're all together in a group. I can put them out of the way if I don't want to see them. If I want to see them again, just double click here and they come back in the view. So it's a nice way of organizing your code. I'm going to do another region right here. Mesh components. Now if you look for the code of the other project I had, it was very, very messy. I wasn't doing all these things. If you really want to make a really clean and robust program, you want to do this. You want to comment your code, you want to use regions, you want to use summary comments like this at the beginning of every class. So it explains what the class is. See how it has summary around this comment? This is basically just a note telling you what this class does. This map is a primary class for managing the entire world map. Boom, that's all it does. And so now, if I go later on and I type in map, it's going to throw an error because I can't just type map randomly. But if I put my mouse over it, well, let me do that. Oh yeah, well. If I put my mouse over a map, the IntelliSense in Visual Studio will describe what it is. So you can see in the little thing that appears, it says map is a primary class for managing entire world map. So I can clearly see what it is if I ever forget what it is. Or if someone else is using this project and they want to know what the map class is, they can just put their mouse over it and it will tell them. So that's a nice little feature of Visual Studio, which is one of the reasons why I use it, because it's so powerful with things like that. It really makes it easy to organize your code. And you can just minimize the awake function, and now, okay. So, we have these image maps, and there's a problem now. I need to somehow assign the textures to these image map variables so that this function can grab them. Because right now, if I start looking at these image maps, it won't do anything because there's nothing stored in these variables. So in order to do that, I'm going to actually change these from private to public variables. Now when you make a variable public in Unity, it does something very special. Not only can you access these variables outside the class by going class name dot and then the variable, going like that, you can access the variable. But also, the most important thing to understand is that you can access the variables from within the inspector. So now if I go back to Unity, I click on map and I look at the script for map, it has all the variables listed right here. So all I have to do is grab the texture, drag and drop it into the associated map down here. Color map goes there, height map goes here, and the normal map is not even on that list. I need to make a normal map. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to get rid of, I'm going to just go public texture 2D normal map. And thank you, Anzi, for that wonderful comment. I appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to go back here. You gotta click on it, or else so it reloads the scripts, and then it will add the new thing to it, the normal map. So now I can just drag the normal map on here. So I don't actually have a tree map or river map yet, but these are going to be used to generate the trees and the rivers on the map, kind of like CK2. But I don't actually have those ready yet. I don't have a river map or a tree map prepared, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to do the basic generation first. So now I can go back to the script. You still watching? You're still watching. Sorry, I like knowing that you're still watching. If you stop watching, please tell me so I know. So I know I'm not talking to no one, because then I'll just like stop talking to the stream as much. But yeah. So all these variables now have the texture stored in them. So now I can go private void start. So what is the difference between a start and a wake? Well, a wake happens first and then start happens. So the reason why there's two different functions between start and a wake is because start is for adding variable stuff, like initializing variables, like saying mf is equal to this, mr is equal to this, and start is for the code that occurs when you start the game. So awake is just for variables and start is just for code, and that is to organize things. So what I'm going to do now is I need to grab the color information from the color map. So I need to figure out how to do that. The best way to do that would be to go into my internet, and I can go to I can type texture 2D Unity, and here's a nice explanation of it. I already know what to do, but I just want to show you how I figure things out if I don't know how to do. And you can just go look at these functions, member functions of texture 2D, and I need to find a member function that will extract all the pixels, all the color data, and store it in a variable, so I can then use that variable to determine what color is at every pixel, and then use the information about what colors at every pixel to determine information about how to draw the map. So I'm going to end up using getPixels32 because it gets a block of pixels in color 32 format. That is accurate enough. I don't need it to be floating point notation numbers, which would be a lot more accurate. They would have decimals. So what I'm talking about, get pixels. Every pixel has four values. Red, green, blue, and alpha. So every application ever, that is how they store color values, is red, green, blue, and alpha. So it mixes those colors together, and you can make any combination of colors. Now when I say getPixels32, the difference between getPixels32 and getPixels is that getPixels32 will get the numbers, but they won't have any decimals after them. So there can't be red value of 128.3. There's only a red value. It will return a red value of 128. But getPixels without the 32 will return 128.3. So the getPixels without the 32 is a lot more accurate than the getPixels with the 32. However, it is also a lot slower. So it is not really necessary for me to do that. So for the sake of speed, I'm going to use getPixels32 because it's faster. I'm not really worried about color clarity in this step. I'm just trying to get the basics of what the heights are from the height map. So I'm going to go here. In my start function, I'm going to go color 32 array height map raw equals height map dot get, use the functions like found, get pixels 32. So I'm using the height map variable that has the height map stored in it, and I go dot get pixels 32. And I put little parentheses after it because this is a function. So it grabs the pixels from the height map, and then its equal sign is called the assignment operator because it assigns this to this. So it takes the information about every single pixel, it passes it through the assignment operator into this variable that I just created as a color 32 array. What is a color 32 array? Well, it's actually an array of color 32s. That was kind of a stupid explanation, but so I could actually just go color 32, my color, and I could have a single color 32 and have a variable to store a single color 32s in. But what if I want to store an entire list of color 32s together in a single variable? You use what is called an array. So I'm actually storing a whole, like every single pixel in the entire map stored in a single long string of, like a long like cluster. Like think of an array like a bunch of slots. So there are different slots, and each slot can have its own color from the array added to it, right? So I do this function. It outputs an entire array of pixels where each slot is a different color, which contains the R, the G, the B, and the A values for that pixel, and then it stores it in this variable. And it's an array, so it's like a whole list of them instead of just one. What if I want to access a certain index of the array? What if I want to access a certain color in that array at a specific index, like at a certain point in the list? Well, I go like this. I go color 32, and I can say color at index 32, and I equal that to height map raw, and I can just go 32. So what did I just do? I'm grabbing the color that's the 32nd index of height map raw, which is this variable that has the array of colors, and I'm storing it in here. So I'm taking that and I'm storing it in this variable. So that's the power of arrays. You can have a whole list of things, and you can just access them by putting it in between square brackets like this. Very powerful. Now, there's one big issue with arrays, though, and that is you cannot change the size of an array after you create it. So if I create an array for height map raw, and height map raw has exactly 100 colors in it, and I want to add a 101st color to it, it would not work, because arrays are fixed in size. You cannot add more to it after you create it. However, I can replace the third color with a different color, but I cannot add a new slot to the array to add a new color. You cannot do that. They're fixed in size. If you want to have a data structure that's similar to an array that you want to actually add stuff to, you would use a different type of data structure. There are many types of data structures in C#, and array is only one of them. I would actually use a list. And a list, which is a special type of, it's very similar to an array, except for it's mutable, meaning you can change what's in it. You can change the size of the list, but you can't change the size of an array. So yeah, I'm now, I don't know how much programming you know, Anzi. I really don't know how much you know. So I'm trying to go slow just for you so you can follow along. But what I did was I just created this array that has every single pixel, every single color in the entire map stored in this variable. So I took the image and I converted it into a format where I can just go grab the color at this pixel and it'll take it, and then I can examine it and I can figure out what's in it. So what do I have to do? I have to go through every single pixel of this array, and I have to figure out what height is at that pixel. And then using that height, I can determine what height I have to make that part of the map when I draw it. So I'm going to create a new array. And instead of creating this in the function, I'm going to put this in the class. So I'll explain something here. You may notice I'm putting these variables out here in the class, and then there's variables that are in the function. So a variable that is declared in the function, like color32 array height map raw, that is declared in the function. If I tried mentioning height map raw in a different function, like for instance, go color32 this color equals height map raw, and I could go like 112, yeah. It's not going to know what I'm talking about because this variable is not in this function. This variable is scoped. That's the word for it, scope. It's scoped to be in this function. So only things within this function can access this variable. However, these variables, texture 2D height map, texture 2D tree map, all this stuff, these are outside the function and they are in the class itself. So I can access any of these variables anywhere within the class. That's how I'm accessing this MF in here, and I'm accessing the height map in here. I can also access the height map in here. See, it picks it up on the IntelliSense list. So I can use this height map in there too. So that is what scope is. It's a very important thing to understand in programming. Scope is the region and where you can access a variable. And you don't want your scopes to be too big. You don't want to put an object, a variable outside this function that you only use in this function, because you're wasting space. Because after this function is finished, the variables that are scoped only within that function will be deleted from memory. So this saves memory on your computer, because after you're done using something and you don't need it anymore, it goes away automatically. This is done through a process called garbage collection. This is an automatic process that C# does. It automatically destroys things that are no longer needed, that are in a function that you just scoped. But the thing is, in other languages like C++, scope is a lot different. You actually have to code it yourself. Garbage collection does not exist in C++. So you have to collect the garbage, so to speak, all by yourself. You have to destroy the variables yourself when you go out of scope. You still won't be able to access them outside of scope, but they're still existing in memory, which is very wasteful. So you have to use what's called a deconstructor. But don't worry about that because you're using C# and you don't have to worry about that sort of thing in C#, because it does automatically for you. That's one of the reasons why I think you should start out with C# and not jump into Unreal yet. Okay, so I'm going to use what's called a for loop because I need to iterate through every single pixel in this array. This color32 array of pixels is a giant list of pixels, right? And I need to go through every single pixel. And in every single pixel, I need to determine what the RG and B values are averaged. Why do I do the average of the RG and B values? Well, because look at this. Look at my height map. The height map is black and white. I gotta open it. The height map is black and white. So, and if I want to see what the colors of black and white images are here, I'll just go here. I'm gonna open this in GIMP so I can explain how the colors work. This is gonna take a moment. Yeah, this actually might take a while to load. But so how colors work? If there's something called saturation. And when you have a color that is completely black, completely white, or anything in between, that is called a desaturated color because it has absolutely no saturation. Now a saturated color, on the other hand, would be a color like red, green, blue. Those actually have color to them. So they're saturated. But if you look at these colors, they're desaturated because they have no color to them. They're just black and white. And if I go ahead and I grab this tool and I grab one of these colors and I look at it in here, let's look at the RGB values of this color. Let's see my there we go, RGB. You can see right here, RGB. Ignore HSV. That's a different valuing system for colors. RGB, the red, green, and blue values of the color. If you notice, they're all the same. They're all 86. If I go to white, if I go and grab this white color right here, you can see they're all the same again. They're all 217. And no matter where I go, for a desaturated color, all of the values will be exactly the same. So what do? This is a height map. So what I want to do, when I grab the color from the pixel, to determine the height that is at that pixel, I will have to find the average of all three colors. Now what I could do is just pick one color and just use that. But if I find the average, it will make sure if there's a variation, if there actually is some saturation in this pixel, it will take that into account. Though there's not supposed to be, it's good to practice to take saturation into account, even if it's not used, right? So how would I make this saturated? Well, the easiest way to add saturation to a desaturated color, actually, is to just make one of the values not be the same. So if I change one of the values so it's not the same, suddenly it starts getting saturated. Suddenly it's starting to be green. But if I change all of them to be the same again, it's not saturated anymore. Now it's gray. Yeah, so that explains how color saturation works. There's so many things in game design like that. But yeah. So I'm gonna grab every single pixel from that picture, and I'm gonna determine the value of the RGB averaged, and that will be the height. Now, another thing, RGB values go from 0 to 255. This has to do with how bytes work in memory, but there's a reason why it's 0 to 255. It's actually 256, 1 to 256, but you refer to them as 0 to 255. So those are all the values that an RGB can be. It's anywhere between 0 and 255. So since I know this, I know that a color that has 255 red, 255 green, and 255 blue will be the tallest height that the map can possibly have, and a color that has 000 for RGB will be the lowest height that the height could possibly have, that a pixel could possibly have. Sorry. So I can do that. So I'm gonna go and just grab a random color here for the sake of example. I'm gonna say color 32 pixel equals height map, and I'm just going to go 4. So I'm grabbing the fourth pixel in the image. It actually goes row by row and then column by column. So it's going, the fourth pixel is the fourth pixel from the top left of the image. And I need to say height map raw, not height map. Height map raw 4. Okay. So I grab this pixel. Now I want to figure out what height is at this pixel. So I'm going to store the height as a number between 0 and 1. 0 being the lowest height and 1 being the highest height. So I'm going to, and this number is going to be a decimal number. It's going to be point something. That's the main thing. That's a decimal number. So when you're making a decimal, there are 3 different data types you can store a number as. There's floating point, double, and decimal. Don't worry about this. The only thing you have to worry about is that I'm using float right now, which is used for storing decimal numbers. So in a float variable, so float height, in float variables, you can store things like this. You can store that number in there because it's a decimal. It's throwing an error for some reason, but yeah, you can do that. Now, if I was using an integer number, int height, and I try doing that, it would throw an error. Why? Because this is not an integer. An integer is a number without a decimal. So if I want to store it, I can do just 23, and it'll be fine. Well, I didn't use it ever, so it's saying I assigned to this, but I never used it, so it's kind of a waste. But anyways, yeah, if you're using a variable, you got to pick the right type. And since I want a decimal number between 0 and 1, I'm going to use a float because that includes decimals. And I'm just going to go float height equals, and then after this equal sign, before the end of the statement, I am going to calculate the height of this pixel. That's the index number 4. So the first thing I need to do is I need to access the R, the G, and the B values of pixel. So and add them together. Then my dog. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, so I'm going to add the R to the G and the B values of the pixel together and then divide it by 3 because that is how you find an average. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go pixel.R plus pixel.G plus pixel.B. So I'm grabbing pixel.R is the red color. See, red component of the color. If I put my mouse over it, it tells you. Pixel.G is the green component and pixel.B is the blue component. So I'm adding these 3 together and then I divide it by 3. So that finds the average of the color. And then what I want to do is I want to normalize this number between 0 and 1. So instead of being from 0 to 255, I want this number to be in between 0 and 1. So the best way to do this is simply divide the number by the maximum value it can be. So I divide the whole thing, put the whole thing in parentheses, and divide this whole thing by 255. This is just simple arithmetic. So if I divide a number by the maximum value it can be, it will be that number between 0 and 1. That's just how it works. So let me show you an example because I feel like I'm not explaining this enough. So if I have the number 8. So I have 8 out of 10, and I want to convert this to a number between 0 and 1. How would I do that? Since it's 8 out of 10, I just divide it by 10. And it gives me 0.8. So 8 is 0.8 of the way up to 1 from 0. That's all that means. So I'm dividing the red, green, and blue value added together by 3 and then divided by 255. So now I can go debug log height, and I can run the game, and it will grab this pixel, it will determine the height, and then it'll print it out onto the screen. So this is pretty much all I'm going to show you, dude, because I feel like I'm talking to a toddler. No, I'm kidding. I feel like you don't know that much, and I don't want to start talking crazy and confuse you. So if you want to learn more, I can give you some sources, and I can give you some ways to learn. But I mean, I don't think I'm gonna be able to teach you the entirety of C#. I just don't think I can do that. So, but I'm gonna run this, and it threw an error. Okay, so if I look at the console, it says Unity exception. Texture height map cellular 11.13.17 is not readable. The texture memory cannot be addressed from scripts. So what is this problem? If I double click this, it will take me to the error in the script. So the error is occurring right here. It goes height map picture dot get pixels 32. So it's grabbing the pixels 32 from the height map and storing it in this variable. What is the problem? Well, it's this get pixels 32 because it cannot read the texture because the texture is not marked as readable. So if I go to the height map and I look at the settings, I can actually check readable, and then I click apply. Now if I stop the game and I run it again, it should work. 0. So the average color at position 4 is 0, which doesn't make any sense to me. So position 4 would be like the 4th pixel over up in this corner. I guess it would be 0 because it's like white up there on the very edge. Let me see. I'm gonna zoom in. I actually have no idea why it's 0, but oh, I made a mistake because look at this. 255 is an integer. This is something very important in programming. 255 is an integer. Whenever you divide something by an integer, it returns an integer. And because I'm looking for a decimal, it will just return 0 every single time, because it cuts off the decimal whenever you divide by an integer. So I'm going to go and put right here, float. Now when I run it, it should work. 0.33333. There we go. So the color is 0.333, is 1/3 of the way between black and white, which that's what this kind of gray color looks like. So that makes sense, because that's the fourth pixel in the image is like, let me show you where the fourth pixel is. It's like way up here. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like somewhere in here. That's where the pixel is, and it's this gray color, which looks like a 0.3 to me. So I think that's good. I'm not really going to show you anything else, Anzi, because I don't know. I don't feel like I can teach you all this stuff. There's so much to learn in this. I don't know what your skill level is, but I'm assuming you're not that high up there. I don't know. Don't be mad at me if I'm wrong. Just tell me if I'm wrong. But I feel like I would have to walk you through a lot of this stuff, and I don't really know how to. I'm not a good teacher, to be honest. I kind of stopped teaching people. I mean, I guess I could teach you if you really want me to. I don't know. Or if you want me to, I can give you a good video series that explains everything about C# so you can jump right into this. I mean, just tell me how helpful my teaching was to you, because maybe I'll keep doing it. Yeah, so just playing chat. I'm gonna keep typing some code here. Don't mind me. I'm gonna get rid of this because this is an example, and I'm gonna actually type the real thing. So I'm gonna go for, and I'm actually gonna make a region here. Region heights and region, and I'm gonna go private float array heights, you know, public float array heights get return. Yeah, don't worry about what I'm doing. This is probably confusing you. I don't know if it is or not. I don't know what your level is, Anzi, because I've never seen you coding. Are you there? Are you just not going to reply? Alright, so I'm making a for loop. I don't know what you know and what you don't know, but a for loop is basically a way on how I can loop through every single pixel in this array. I start with 0, and I start at 0 index, which is the first index of an array. I go all the way to the length of the array, the end of the array, minus 1, and I add 1 to it every time. Yeah, you gotta. I don't know. It's my idea, and I've realized in game development that purchasing assets from the asset store is not a smart idea, because if you can't make it yourself, you might as well not buy it, because, I mean, you probably won't be able to implement it right in your game anyways. So if you don't know how to do something, don't buy it. I mean, I guess buying an asset in the store would be a good way to get something done quickly, but I would rather make things myself. So I'm going to go through every single pixel. I'm just going to go heights curve pixel equals pigment raw curve pix dot r plus height map raw curve pix dot g plus height map raw curve pix dot b. Okay. Okay, I'm actually making these private because I was going to do this differently. I was just doing it public so I could show you how to do it really easily, but I'm doing it a different method because this is how I typically do things. I make it private because this is more of a C#ish way of doing things, I guess. I'm not going to use the start. I'm going to go public void build. I'm going to pass in texture 2D height map, texture 2D tree map. How do you fix these capitals? Consistency is very important when you're naming things. Having a capital M for some and a lowercase m for others is not very good practice. You have to be OSCD, I guess you could say. Okay, so now I'm going to go height map equals, I'm going to go this, height map equals height map, this dot tree map equals tree map, this dot river map equals river map. Okay, I gotta make this B capital now. This dot color map equals color map. This dot normal map equals normal map. So I need to make this be a float. This needs to be divided by 2.355. It's just how I did it before. Let's actually do it like this. Or I could just put an F here. It's float. It's a little cleaner, I'll do that. Since you can't really make a singleton with a mono behavior, this is kind of how I do it. I do go like, this is kind of a rough way of doing it, but that's how you gotta do it. So we go public static game map self. I can actually change this from being static. Okay, so I'm just going to go if self f self equals null, self equals this, else throw new exception. You cannot have multiple maps at the same time. Okay. Okay. So you can only have one map class. If you try to make another one, it'll throw an error. That's just to keep it being cleaner so people don't like spam like multiple things. Like I can't film that. I'm streaming. I can't show that. figure this out. Ah, there we go. That's what I was looking for. That's what I was looking for. I remember. Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna go, that's what's called VPU. Stands for vertices per unit. And I'm gonna go private int VPU, public int VPU. Get turn yeah. Okay. Trying to convince me, dude. I'm sticking with Unity. I'm not wasting time. I can do everything I need to do. It's fine. Like, what's your goal? Tell me what your plan is right now. Why do you want me to change to Unity, to Unreal? Do you want me to make a game with you? Is that what this is? You're not watching. I'm gonna turn off the stream. Thank you for watching, everybody.